If you think you're a household name or not, you got to show up, you got to put in the work, you got to be here for the group. And that was established. And out of that, some names emerged. A Sebastian Berhalter, a Christian Roldan reemerged, Patrick Agyemang for a bit, Max Arfsten, Matt Freese. And because of that, some big names went out. A Matt Turner, a Yunus Musa, and so on and so on and so forth. The line has been drawn. Here, you fight. Here, you claw. Here, it doesn't matter who you are. You have to put in the work. And then tactically, little by little, we started seeing them find their form. They like 3 in the back, the 3 center backs, the outside backs providing the width, the 2 playmakers underneath the 9, and you started seeing a little bit of maybe what you could expect come summertime, and you feel a bit more comfortable about the identity, the cultural shift, and tactically how this team is going. It may have been very late, a lot more than I would have liked, a lot more than Kasey would have liked, or Jeff would have liked for somebody who's making $6 million a year, but it came. Now, we saw the friendlies. We want to see it in a real game. We want to see it against real opposition. And quite frankly, I think the only thing I can complain about in these last 6 friendlies is I think there are still some doubts in Pochettino's mind, at least by his lack of consistency of who that starting 11 is.
And Jeff, now you've covered the U.S. men's national team for some time now, and even before this show, you have been speaking to ex-players, ex-coaches as well. For you, do you agree with Herc with what that change has come? We know Mauricio Pochettino spoke so much about wanting to change the culture of the sport here, and as it relates to his players. What do you feel has been the biggest change that you've noticed or other people are noticing since Pochettino's appointment?
There is a competitive tension now within the group. When you go back to Copa America, you could pick the lineup with your eyes closed. I mean, it's like, okay, we're going to have, Way on the wing, and we're going to have Adams in the middle, and Balogun was arriving on the scene. He was going to be up top. Yeah. And people were too secure. Players were too secure in their role, in where they stood in the team. And I think Mauricio Pochettino recognized that. I think he wanted to be sure that he was actually seeing what he was seeing. But then you saw players being left out of camps. Weston McKennie a couple times was left out. You saw, other players not getting the playing time that you would normally expect. I mean, you think about that Uruguay game. There was no Pulisic, there was no McKennie. If I'm not mistaken, there was no Chris Richards. I mean, the list goes on. And so what that did was it gave some players who didn't think they had a chance before, it gave them a real opportunity to impress the staff, really stake their claim to a spot. You look at guys like Sebastian Berhalter. Malik Tillman is another one who I think really took his chance. Alex Freeman. That started at the Gold Cup. I mean, I was certainly questioning some of the selections then, and if really going with almost a youth movement was the right move. It turned out to be a master stroke, at least at this stage. So I go back to that competitive tension. Guys didn't know if they were going to play or not. And so I think that has kind of helped compensate for the fact that there was no World Cup qualifying. Because usually that tension is created by qualifying. And, guys that are on the outside looking in, okay, how do I get good with the coach? How do I figure out what he wants? How do I, if I'm a starter, how do I keep that position? And so that's usually there, but because there was no World Cup qualifying, again, guys got comfortable, and now I think that's gone. I think it's a real meritocracy now that Mauricio Pochettino has created, and I think it's benefited the whole squad because it's a much deeper squad than what it was. I mean, obviously we'll find out at the World Cup just how deep it actually is and how guys perform, but certainly that competitive tension, I keep going back to that is really the big difference for me.
Competitive tension. I love that phrase, man. Nothing like some healthy competition. And Kasey, that's what you want. You want to keep them guessing. That's something that we've talked about a lot. Has that been the biggest change you've noticed under Pochettino, or what do you think the identity under Poch is now?
Well, it was the biggest change that had to happen because players took their foot off the gas. And that's inexcusable. I mean, every good team in the world, you should be able to pick the starting 11. Because those players are the best players in the squad. They're the best players that are fighting for the best players all the way around. And instead, we had this situation where he had to build competition because the guys that should have been competing weren't. And that worries me a little bit because Jeff, I like the idea that we have this big squad, but we do not have a big squad. We have a group of players that are, if we want to go deep in this tournament, we need our stars to show up and give everything they can and have great tournaments. Then you need a couple little surprise packages, and then you need some other guys just to have good, steady games. But the fact that we had to go through all this, the fact that we had no competitive matches, but it had somehow lost this competitive edge, frightened me. And yes, I'm relieved that it's emerged in the last couple friendlies, and we've seen this little bit of an edge.
A lot of these players are not going to be familiar with, I don't care how big of a club game they have been involved in. Herc, this is obviously going to be the biggest stage for a lot of these players, and we don't know the roster yet, but who would you like to see really embrace this type of a tournament?
I'm going to answer, but I'm going to piggyback on what Kasey said. I'm going to echo that. I think it's crucial that you know who you can count on. It's crucial that those players you think are going to be your 11 get as many reps together as they can. And you're going to head into the World Cup. Maybe they get 2-3 games together. If Mauricio Pochettino, come March, says, this is my team, this is my 11, you get 2-3 games together, and you're hoping that the players you think you can count on are fit, are healthy, and in form, and can be that fit, healthy, and informed together. I think that's a dangerous thing to rely on, and I'm with Kasey there. Listen, we can talk about the feel-good stories of a Diego Luna. We could talk about the feel-good stories of a Sebastian Berhalter, the ex-U.S. men's national team coach's son, or Alex Freeman, or Max Armstead, or whoever you want to insert here. But if Christian Pulisic isn't at his optimum level, if Christian Pulisic isn't healthy, because I don't believe he's healthy right now, if he's not geared and ready to go, I don't care what you think you're doing in this World Cup, it's not happening. He is the different one in the program. He's the difference maker. He has the ability, because you're going to be defending a lot, I presume, to change a game in transition, to change a game on a set piece, to change a game with creativity and the finishing product. If he's not ready for you, it's over.
Jeff, just talk to me about the pressure that they're going to feel. I know you haven't suited up for the U.S. men's national team like Kasey or Herc, but you are part of the pressure because we are parts of the media. And you know,
this guy applies the pressure.
He applies the pressure indeed. And Jeff, we know that you're a part of it. We know that the media is going to be on them. The entire country is going to be on them.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be nothing like they've ever experienced before. Certainly guys like Christian Pulisic and Tyler Adams have been in the Champions League. You know, they're familiar with that kind of intensity, that kind of attention. But a home World Cup is something that a player gets to experience once in their life, if they're lucky. I mean, not every player, even some of the great players, get to experience that. And so, it's really going to be important, I think, for the leaders on this team to kind of help keep the group on an even keel. I mean, that's the coaching staff's job too. But within the locker room, I think it's, I'm looking at guys like a Tim Ream, like a Tyler Adams. I mean, I think Tyler Adams is kind of the emotional center of this team. Not only because of his role as captain. I mean, I can remember the press conference before the Iran match in 2022, and he was magnificent. I mean, he completely diffused so many tense situations, so many aggressive questions that were being fired at him. And I just think that it was almost inspirational to watch that. And I think the group, his teammates, fed off that. And so I'm looking at a guy like Tyler Adams, who has been to a World Cup, who has played at the highest level. He's doing it, week in, week out in the Premier League right now. I look at him and Tim Ream just because he's another guy with a lot of experience. I look at those two guys as being critical to kind of just keeping this team on an even emotional keel and being able to deal with all that attention, with all that pressure that's going to come.
And Kasey, Jeff brings up that point, of course, about Tyler Adams, who definitely has been a captain in so many ways for the U.S. men's national team. We, of course, interviewed him not just a couple of weeks ago, and he spoke about the fact that he feels that this current crop of players, even with the new additions, almost don't have an excuse to fail at this World Cup because there's enough of them that have already played at a World Cup, that have experience overseas. So do you feel this current squad is mature enough to handle the pressure that's going to be thrown at them?
I would have loved a series of qualifying games. I would have loved a series of matches that mattered. That's the only thing that really kind of worries me is that they're going into this with only playing a series of friendlies, and that scares me. And that's why I think if I was going to, pick the squad, pick the starting lineup, it would lean heavily on players that have more of that pressured situation because we weren't able to introduce players into that level of pressure during qualifying. So I agree. Yes, there are players in our squad that have played in a lot of very pressure games. Now Jeff brings up Champions League. Champions League's a piece of it, but also that pressure of being in a relegation fight is another combination of gets you prepared for these types of big matches.
That goal and their name goes down in history. So
Yes.
for these attackers that we've been talking about, would this home pressure help them or can it hurt them?
Can we be honest for a second?
Of course.
What pressure are we talking about?
The pressure of scoring on home soil at a World Cup.
Sure, I guess. Now, let me explain myself. How difficult it is to score in a World Cup that Haji Wright was the last nine to score in a World Cup since Brian McBride. We're talking about 2002 World Cup.
Yeah.
It's not easy to score in games at the international level, much less at the World Cup level. Not everybody's an Mbappe, not everybody's a Messi. Hell, Cristiano Ronaldo has found it very difficult in the knockout round. It's a very difficult thing to do. There is no pressure in the United States like other countries. The reality is, whether people like this or not, is that the U.S. can crash out at this home World Cup, and maybe it's in the news cycle for 3, 4, 5, 6 days national. And after that, we will still be talking about it, but that's it. These guys are going to go out in the streets. They may get recognized. They're not going to get tomatoes thrown at them.
Hopefully not.
They're not going to have threats made to them. They won't feel like they're in an uncomfortable setting. Whereas if you're in another country, if England bombs out of this World Cup, those guys aren't going to go outside. Those guys are going to read about it, hear about it, see it for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And then the next international tournament, it's going to be brought up again. Mm-hmm. It's going to be one of the biggest failures in their lives. Not sporting, just in their lives. But because of this group, you can play a little carefree. When you look at who's in the crowd, in the stands, could you imagine playing Brazil and it's overwhelmingly Brazilian? Playing Argentina, overwhelmingly Argentine. Mm-hmm. Playing against the Portuguese, playing against Mexico, you are in a group where Paraguay is not going to be the dominant team in the stands. Australia is not going to be the dominant team in the stands. And Turkey, most likely, that's a wild card, but I don't feel will be the most dominant team in the stands if they qualify. You may have a real home field advantage that can make you play carefree. Mm-hmm. And for these players, I think that'll be important.
And Jeff, Herc just brings up a good point too, because in terms of the crowds that we're expecting, you of course are going to be out there for the group stages for the games in LA as well as Seattle. Is there any way that the US can turn Seattle and LA into a home game and make it feel like a home game?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Seattle is one of the best soccer cities in the country. Mm-hmm. I mean, you go back, you know, they haven't had an opportunity to host many games just because of where they are in the country.
Copa America, USMNT national.
I'm going to get to that.
Yes.
I'm going to get to that. Just because of where they are in the country. So it's not easy for guys who are playing overseas in Europe to come over. I mean, they want to get guys off the plane as quickly as possible. So, you know, I think that rules Seattle out a lot of times. But, you know, I remember back to a World Cup qualifier in 2013 against Panama. The city, the fans showed out incredibly well. As Herc mentioned, Copa America 2016 against Ecuador. It was another great evening, a great event. Seattle turned out for the U.S. men's national team in an absolutely huge way. And so Seattle, I have no doubt about it. I mean, L.A. is a little bit different, but, you know, I think back to the 1994 World Cup and the way that team, the way the U.S. team was supported at the Rose Bowl. Mm-hmm. And so L.A. loves big events. They love stars. They love watching teams, rise or fall, but especially rise. And so I think, once again, they're going to surprise some people. I think they're going to turn out and really support this U.S. team. Again, it helps that they're playing Paraguay, who there will be Paraguayan fans in the stands, no doubt about it. But, I think LA senses the big occasion. I think the sports fans know a big event when they see it. And so I don't have much doubt in my mind that LA is going to support the team in a big way and really provide that critical home field advantage.
I mean, if Turkey come, we know that the Turkish do travel
that's
very
the wild card
well.
there.
That is going to be the wild card one indeed. Well, we're going to push on as well because we want to talk about a couple more things. But let me remind you about the Gab and Jules podcast. A fresh edition dropped today as Gab and Jules are discussing all things from the weekend of the Premier League and more. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's talk about the spine now. The spine of the team, straight from the back right to the midfield. And Kasey, I'm coming straight to you because the goalkeeping position, that is one that the U.S. has had locked down for many a generation. But now there has been more questions than answers. So plain and simple, is Matt Freese pretty much the number one? And how much comfort do you have and trust do you have in him being the number one?
Well, this is the tricky part. I mean, I think throughout that whole process, Pochettino kept a lot of things open, gave a lot of guys opportunities. But the one thing he didn't do was change the goalkeeping. Now, I would have been okay with that if Matt Freese would have been just playing brilliantly. That particularly wasn't the case. Matt did fine, but it wasn't a case of where I looked at Matt Freese and went, wow, that was a great performance, and look at it, the way he did this, and look at that. No, he was fine. So that's why it surprised me that he didn't give more opportunities to maybe Matt, maybe Zach Steffen, maybe somebody else. So that just kind of surprised me a little bit with that. And so, there's no question. This guy's never played in a game that really mattered. And I think that scares me a little bit with Matt Freese. I want to make one quick point on what Jeff said about Seattle and the Pacific Northwest. The biggest problem is artificial pitches. That's the main reason why the U.S. doesn't play there, because they have to lay a grass pitch on top of it, and we all know what the hit or miss is of that. So I think if Lumenfield or in Portland, if they had a grass pitch, you'd see a lot of matches in the Northwest for the men's national team.
And Herc, I know it's not your area of the pitch, but let's talk about that back line. Oh, I don't know. You ever played center back? You ever played a center back?
Oh, center back.
Yeah, I was about to say, let's talk about that back line now, because you did allude to it earlier on when you said that there were questions defensively about that back line. But in terms of the best center back pairing, what are you saying? Well,
it's not a pairing anymore. It's three, right? That's the one position or line that I'm most worried for the U.S. men's national team. It's Chris Richards and everybody else. CB1 and everybody else. And in that everybody else, you have an aging Tim Ream. And Tim Ream is your best defender with the ball. He sees things. He can play these long balls in between lines, progressive passes. He's composed. He won't get nervous. But if Tim Ream is forced to defend, God help you. God help you. He doesn't have the legs anymore. And I say this respectfully, but he should have been phased out a while ago. And the fact that he's not phased out forces you to play Tim Ream right now. And if Major League Soccer is any indication of Tim Ream where he's at, the first two games versus St. Louis, he plays for Charlotte. And versus the LA Galaxy, if you face Tim Ream one-on-one, it's a direct path to goal. It's a weakness for your team defensively. But given the pool, he's so good on the ball, he's almost a necessary evil for Mauricio Pochettino right now. But that back line, you're one injury away from being 6s and 7s there and just praying that you can buckle down and get something out of a game.
And Jeff, just to follow up on that back line and the concerns about that back line, if we talk about the fullbacks as well, of course, on their day, you would absolutely always trust a Jedi Robinson. But the point is, he has been dealing with injuries. So has a Serginho Dest as well. So how concerned are you about that? And what is the biggest concern there?
Well, I do want to get back to one point about the center backs. I think the reason you saw Mauricio Pochettino go to a three-man back line is to limit the number of times that a Tim Ream is going to be isolated against an opposition attacker. And so, I mean, there are lots of ways, I think, in that alignment that you can cover for Tim Ream. You know, a wing back can come back. You know, guys can slide over and provide cover in behind. So, yes.
The two defensive midfielders.
Yep.
Yes.
Tyler Adams or Tanner Tessman can come back and provide support. So, I mean, I think there are ways that they can camouflage that weakness and then try to accentuate the positives that Herc talked about. Yes, I'm worried about the wing backs. I mean, I'm worried and I'm not worried because the U.S. seems to have a lot of them. A lot of guys are playing wing back right now. I mean, even Weston McKennie is playing wing back. Tim Weah, Serginho Dest has played wing back, although he's usually an outside back and a back four.
Are you worried about how they play or who it's going to be?
Both. I mean, when I'm thinking of Serginho Dest, yes, defending is not his strong suit. I mean, the reason that I like him in that role is that, again, he's able to go forward, and again, you're camouflaging weaknesses. I'm very worried about Anthony Robinson and just what the future holds for him. It's funny, when he first came back, he played those 6 matches, 90 minutes every time in a row. And on the one hand, I was happy that he was healthy enough, but then I'm thinking, okay, long term, is this too much too soon? And so, not even for the knee, but other things cropping up. And
he just picked up an ankle injury.
Right, he's got an ankle injury, and so the good news is he was back in the 18 at least this past weekend. I think the weekend before he was not in the 18 at all. So, yes, I think as good a job as Max Arfsten has done coming in, I just think that left side is much more solid with an Anthony Robinson there, just given the pedigree of player that he goes up against every week, what he can do on both sides of the ball. He's incredibly adept at getting forward, delivering quality crosses, but defensively he's also solid as well when he's at his best. I mean, I think part of the reason that you're seeing Sessegnon get all those minutes for Fulham is that Anthony Robinson is just not quite right. I think that was the case even before he picked up this injury. So, yeah, I think it's a huge concern. We'll see if a Serginho Dest can slide over to the left, because I've seen him play there for PSV Eindhoven. So I think that can be an option as well. And then you're able to get maybe an Alex Freeman or a Tim Weah on the other side. Again, you're trying to put your best players on the field somehow, some way. So we'll see what decisions Mauricio Pochettino makes. But yes, it's a concern.
My problem here, Jeff, is that we're not playing the man, which is Mauricio Pochettino. And I'm going to be at fault at this, and you'll see why. But he's never played Anthony Robinson there, either because Anthony's been hurt, not available, or because he sees Max Arfsten. That's who's gotten the lion's share of the minutes in that position. So while I agree with Jeff, and you're going to see why I agree with Jeff, I don't know if Mauricio Pochettino agrees with us.
Well, Herc, I want to stick with you just on the midfield now, because if we're talking single six, double pivot, when you look at this player pool for the U.S. men's national team, what would the best setup be?
Well, I'm going to play the man here because our logic has told us that Weston McKennie needs to be in the center of the pitch with Tyler Adams. But I don't think Mauricio Pochettino feels that way. I don't think Mauricio Pochettino trusts Weston McKennie tactically to have that discipline. And then there's the emergence of Tanner Tessman, which cannot be ignored. If we speak of the importance of Tyler Adams, he's not going anywhere, and you can see right there, number 1 on the list, number 1 on the call sheet. Okay, youngest captain, 2022 World Cup. He has the pedigree, he has the leadership, he's bought into your message. I think the obvious emergence of Tanner Tessman leads me to believe that the duality of box-to-box midfielder, and available to play a pivot role with Tyler Adams, but provide something going forward with passing, with vision, and a physical presence, he would be the guy I slot next to Tyler Adams. It'd be Tyler Adams, Tanner Tessman. That is what I would go with and not move. And that's what I think Mauricio Pochettino is going to go with.